Welcome to the 2017 Call to Action Coalition Breakfast. This is our 29th year. I'd like to invite up Reverend Ralph Rebrandt to lead us in the prayer.
Good morning. Thank you for the privilege of standing before you today. As I thought back over the last 30 years, I probably have done this about 5 times. I wanted to share with you that I was able to meet Sheriff David Clark over the weekend, and he has written a book called Cops Under Fire. And he has 2 chapter titles that intrigued me as a pastor that I wanted to just read to. He says, Changing the Culture is a Matter of Faith, Not Politics. That sparked my interest. And the other one is that God is not the enemy, but he's being attacked. So I presume that everybody in this room would agree with those 2 statements. And if you don't, you're currently being, your background is being checked. Thank you for it. Anyway, that was meant as a joke. But good morning to you, and I'd like to pray as we begin. Lord God, we come to you this morning as the creator of heaven and earth. We come to you because we have been made in your image. We are distinct from the animal creation, and we as human beings have the distinct ability to reason, to plan, to undergo pain in our families, and to rejoice when there is amazing change that takes place. And so we recognize this morning that we need your help. We recognize that all of our efforts are empty unless you step in and cause fruit and success. And so I thank you for being able to stand here this morning and pray on behalf of our community and these men and women who have committed their lives to working in our culture. And yet we acknowledge that indeed you are the one who changes hearts. You are the one who gives hope. You are the one that illuminates the path to righteousness. And so we pray that as we gather together, that this would be not only a time of instruction and inspiration for us, but that we would leave from this place with new ideas, new ways to help our families, and new ways to help those lives that we touch. I pray all this in the name of my Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Ralph. I'd like to invite up Fire Chief John Unroll to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, John. At this time, I'd like to recognize people that have come to this. I'd like to have the people from the schools please stand up and be recognized, please. People from the city of Farmington, please stand. People from the courts, please stand. People from the city of Farmington Hills. And the members of the coalition board. People from the Children, Youth, and Families Commission. Okay, and if I haven't called your name, please stand, and we'd like to recognize you for coming and taking time out of your day. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Fire Department EMS Coordinator, Jim Edson.
Good morning. As Mitch said, I'm Jim Edson. I'm the Emergency Medical Services Coordinator for the Farmington Hills Fire Department. For some of you in the room, particularly from Farmington Public Schools, I'm better known as Zach and Allie's dad, lifelong residents of this community and graduates of Farmington Public Schools and currently political science majors at Michigan State. Go Green. So I've had before I go any further, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Mitch and all the other members of the coalition, along with Chief Unruh, for this opportunity to come up and represent the fire department and speak to you for just a few minutes about some of our most recent efforts. I've had the honor to do this a couple of times in the past, and normally I would tell you, given the mission and the theme of this organization, that alcohol, drugs, particularly opiates such as heroin and prescription medication, and domestic violence continue to plague not only our community but society as a whole. We have a number of initiatives, in place where we're trying to, reduce the frequency of those incidents, but we're certainly not immune from them in Farmington Hills. Having lived here for 23 years now, I still think this is a tremendous community, one that I was very proud to raise my children in, but once again, we're not immune from some of the problems that similar sized communities and other metropolitan areas have throughout the country. So that would be the one of the messages that I would share with you, that we continue to have our firefighter paramedics and police officers throughout both communities administering Narcan to individuals who have overdosed on opiates, in many instances with great success. So our folks are continuing to save lives. We continue to respond to a number of incidents involving alcohol, incidents involving domestic violence, and I think both police departments involved do an extraordinary job in that regard as well. I would also say that, as far as our fire department goes, and I think the same can be said for the Farmington Hills Police Department and the Farmington Department of Public Safety, our people are on duty 24/7, responding to any problem that may occur. Within the fire service, we take great pride in being problem solvers, being an all-hazards fire department. If you're experiencing an emergency, you don't know what to do, you don't know who to call, you can always lean on the fire department, and we'll show up and help you solve that problem. And a couple of recent examples are a contractor that was trapped within a confined space within a local construction site, specifically at Beaumont Hospital, Farmington Hills. Pets that are trapped in unusual places such as underground culverts, and obviously the great many medical emergencies and motor vehicle accidents and fires that we respond to as well. So operationally speaking, our people are on duty every day doing what we believe is a fantastic job. From a prevention standpoint, our fire prevention division is unparalleled. They are out there providing a number of education programs. We have many of you are familiar with our assembly program, our fall assembly program, where we have firefighters making up cast members, visiting all the various schools, and conveying some very important fire safety messages. We have another initiative that we're currently partnering with Beaumont Farmington Hills on a fall prevention program. Falls are certainly a public health crisis a multi-billion-dollar public health crisis that we're trying to address as well. So that's a current initiative that we have. From a training standpoint, we are out providing CPR and first aid training in the community. We're obviously providing a lot of continuing education to our firefighter paramedics so they can remain sharp with what they do. And so the fire department is continuing to take on a lot of missions. The last thing that I want to mention is something that I think is in the forefront of everyone's minds right now, and that's response to mass violence. Given this weekend's tragic incident in Las Vegas and the unfortunate frequency that these incidents are occurring, I just want you to know that ever since the incident in Littleton, Colorado at Columbine High School in 1999, all law enforcement agencies throughout the country have been working hard to better respond to those agencies. You'll be happy to know that here in Oakland County, particularly in the last couple of years, all the fire departments throughout the county have been collaborating with law enforcement agencies more than ever before to jointly respond to those incidents, to stop the violence, and to treat any casualties that may result. And knowing people in Las Vegas like I do, and I'm sure many of you were riveted to your televisions watching some of that coverage. I think that was an outstanding response by those agencies involved, particularly law enforcement and the fire service working together. So we have a number of initiatives here in Oakland County that's fostering that collaboration. I'm proud to say, thanks to the leadership of the chiefs here, Chief Unruh, Chief Nebus, Director Demers, that our communities, Farmington Hills and Farmington, are leaders in many of those initiatives. Thank you very much.
I do have Jeff coming here to work on his mic, but I'd like to introduce Farmington Hills Police Chief Chuck Nebus.
Good morning, everyone. I'll try to yell as well until the microphone gets going. Hopefully you can hear me okay. It's my honor to be here at the 29th annual breakfast. I've got 6 topics, 6 minutes here this morning with you. Crime, alcohol, drugs, opioids, marijuana, and domestic violence, about a minute on each. First, as a police chief for crime, it's very easy for me to talk about. We're at the 37-year all-time low. Lowest number of armed robberies in city history, lowest number of auto thefts in city history, the second lowest number of burglaries in city history, all good news. In Michigan here, how we compare to the rest, we're 39% below the rest of Michigan in property crime and 78% below the rest of Michigan in violent crime. There's many agencies that rank safe cities this year in 2017. One of them rated us the 44th safest city in the whole country. So a lot to be proud of. Thank you. And we owe that to the men and women, law enforcement, and the great community support we have. For alcohol, I've been teaching alcohol, liquor law at the police academy for about 30 years, and I've watched the pendulum swing all those years, thousands and thousands of fewer deaths, and drunk driving going down. The last 3 years in Michigan, we had 224 drunk driving arrests a couple years ago, 175. This year, 140 so far. Just a handful of years ago, we used to arrest about 400 people a year for drunk driving. We're very proud that Farmington Hills officers, just a week ago, 3 of our officers were in Mount Pleasant to receive 3 state awards from Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Officer Meister, Edgell, and West, we're very proud of their accomplishments and their recognition. The third topic I want to talk about just briefly this morning is drugged driving. You'll probably remember this incident last year. It was a terrible incident. A 911 call came into in the Kalamazoo area that there was a drunk driver on the road, and suddenly the call came in that 8 bicyclists had been run over by a vehicle. 5 of them died and 3 of them were seriously injured, and the result of that was a drugged driver who was high on methamphetamine and painkillers. And that's one of the things that scares me as police chief right now is drug driving, and we don't really talk that much about it. In Michigan last year, there was 141 people killed on our roadways because of drugged fatalities. There was 171 killed by drunk drivers. In the past decade, this statistic really, really stands out of all the data that I might be sharing with you this morning. In the past decade, drunk driving deaths have decreased 36%, while drugged driving has gone up 263% across the state. And why? There's 3 reasons: opioid abuse, prescription drug abuse, and availability of marijuana. In some of the responses, maybe a couple to share with you briefly that what law enforcement might be doing about it is Governor Snyder signed some new legislation recently called the Barbara and Thomas Swift Law. And it was a couple who was killed in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan by a truck driver who was highly under the influence of THC at the time of the accident, the active ingredient marijuana. And one of the things as a result of that bill is there's 5 counties in Michigan that are experimenting right now with drug detection. They take a swab and they put it in a machine, and it identifies several types of drugs that people might be using. What we really need is a really good test like we have for alcohol, like we have portable breath testing at the side of the road. And what we need is a test because so many drug drivers go escaped. There's probably more of them on the road than drunk drivers, more than we can really even measure. And the fourth topic, real quick, to share with you a little bit, talk a little bit about is opioid abuse. 2016 was the first full year that Farmington Hills Police Department and Fire Department in a calendar year used Narcan to administer to persons who were unresponsive at the scene of drug overdoses. The Fire Department saved several lives that year. There was 33 saves from the Fire Department and 9 saves from the Police Department. And you might have just heard just recently, actually earlier this week, there was a doctor from Farmington who was sentenced to 1 year in prison for, in a 13-month period, he prescribed 13,500 doses of oxycodone and 15,000 doses of hydrocodone. Obviously more than he has patients. I'll show with you just briefly so far this year something we started doing is, I know that you can't see this, but this is a spreadsheet of all the overdoses that we've been tracking in Farmington Hills so far this year. There's 36 persons who have overdosed on drugs. There's 4 people whose names appear on here who died of drug overdoses. And there's a whole slew of people who have been saved so far this year because of Narcan. To share a couple with you, an unresponsive person on the living room floor, foaming at the mouth. They were doing CPR. The victim was a heroin user. Officer Hernandez administered naloxone, and the individual was saved and transported to Beaumont Hospital. An unresponsive gray-skinned heroin user, the 4th time officers had been there. Officers administered naloxone. The whole sheet is filled with that. I remember 4 or 5 years ago we were having discussions like, what's Narcan and should we be carrying it? And here we are today. So drug driving and opioids is a really big concern. Fifth topic for about a minute is marijuana, because a lot's happening with that, so I'm going to spend just a moment there to talk about it. In Michigan, you all know we have Michigan medical marijuana right now. We have grow legislation that takes effect December 15th. There's going to be 5 different kinds of licenses that people who want to grow large amounts can get. The licenses are $4,000 to $8,000 a piece. In 2018, we will probably have an initiative on the ballot for legalizing marijuana in Michigan. Most of the country, most Michiganders are for all of this. I want to share something with you from Colorado. It's something called the Rocky Mountain HIDTA report, and you can Google it, Rocky Mountain HIDTA, H-I-D-T-A. And right now you might not be too interested in Googling it until I share a few of the points of data. It's 180 pages of a report that the federal government's put together. Marijuana traffic deaths, and this is all, it was a 2016 report the last few years in Colorado since recreational marijuana was legalized. Marijuana traffic deaths are up 48%. Marijuana youth usage is up 20%. Marijuana youth usage now in Colorado is #1 in the nation. Marijuana adult usage went up 63%. Marijuana adult usage is now #1 in the nation in Colorado. Emergency room visits are up 32%. The marijuana tax revenue is only half of 1% for the whole state's budget. The marijuana stores, there's 424. Compare that to 322 Starbucks and 202 McDonald's. There's twice the number of stores to get marijuana than there is McDonald's restaurants in the state of Colorado. So, and that report goes on and on and on, and so again, it's the Rocky Mountain HIDTA report, if anybody would be interested in taking a look at that. The last topic to spend a moment on is domestic violence, one of the things Call to Action stands for. Last year we had 160 arrests for domestic violence in Farmington Hills. Was at a community meeting with Judge Parker last night, and you mentioned about what's the big increase in domestic violence, and your instincts are correct, Judge. We're right on target this year. So far we have 156 arrests, so we have a few months yet to go in the year, and we're already where we were at last year. Police officers, domestic violence calls are always a hazard. The Department of Justice says out of all the 911 calls that law enforcement receives around the country, more police officers are killed responding to domestic violence than any other kind of 911 call. We're very fortunate in Farmington Hills. We've had the first domestic violence high-risk response team. Many of the members are here today from the different collaborations in Farmington Hills. Other cities are modeling us. We also had, very proud to say, that one of our officers recently received the OCCCADV Domestic Violence Award. And if I can tell you that acronym this early, I deserve a round of applause. The Oakland County Coordinating Council Against Domestic Violence Award, Detective Chad Double, won that award for Farmington Hills last year. And I was also very proud to, in the past year, receive an award on behalf of the department from Prosecutor Jessica Cooper. The department received a special award for our treatment of victims. So domestic violence is something we take very, very serious. It's an honor to be here with you this morning to kind of reflect on some things that CTAC stands for: alcohol and drugs and domestic violence, some important issues. We pause each year for a breakfast to kind of remember and talk about those issues a little bit. Hopefully I've taught you something new or made you think about something important. And it's nice to see, by the way, some of our youths here this morning to talk about these very, very important subjects. And I know Mitch had a lot of people stand, but just could just the law enforcement, public safety, fire, and police people here this morning, they make all these good things happen. If you could all stand, police and fire, for a minute. Thank you. It's my honor to be here again. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to invite up Farmington's Director of Public Safety, Frank Demers.
Well, good morning, everybody. Not instinctively, but I just happen to be wearing a maize and blue tie today. I don't know how that happened, but go blue. Okay. Of course, I'm honored to be here with all of you today. I think this is my third or fourth Call to Action Coalition breakfast where I've been director and be able to speak. I'd just like to point out a couple people in the crowd that are with us today from the City of Farmington. Deputy Director Ted Worthman, Commander Andy Morshey, and Councilwoman Sarah Bowman is in the back. I think that pretty much covers all from the City of Farmington. I'd also like to thank Mitch Seeley and the Call to Action Coalition for hosting today's breakfast and doing the great work that you guys do throughout the year to bring awareness to this, to our issues of domestic violence, abuse, and addiction. Before we even started today, Commander Andy Morshey worked the midnight shift last night and was telling me about one of our officers was involved in a pursuit last night. It wasn't a very long pursuit, and with assistance from our neighbors from Farmington Hills, our officers were able to stop the individual. And as it turned out, they were clearly under the influence of some sort of narcotic. There was talk of possibly even bath salts that they might have been under the influence of. But this is right here in our community today. You know, the dangers of, like Chief Nebus mentioned, so many individuals who are essentially driving stoned and pretty much going undetected is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. But I'm proud to work in this community where we really have set the standard for responding to things like this. A lot of things that Jim Edson mentioned. We do things here that a lot of other communities are just getting started, and we've been doing them for a few years already. And I really do think that we're on top of our game, but we do have quite a ways to go. And again, I'm proud of the role that we play, the small role that we play in that team effort. So I'm focusing more on addiction, more towards opioids today. You know, the last few years we've talked about this, and what more can we say? Well, a lot, unfortunately. The problem certainly isn't getting better as it's going worse. As I was preparing for my speech, I did a little research, and the statistics for 2016 as it relates to opioid overdoses and drug overdoses are pretty sobering. Overdose deaths in Michigan up 18% compared to 2016. 2,335 drug-related deaths in 2016 compared to 1,981 in 2015. The majority of those deaths are related to opioid abuse. Nationwide, 42,404 overdose deaths, and of those, 33,091 are suspected opioid overdoses. And the Centers for Disease Control has ranked Michigan number 16th in measuring the rate of drug-related deaths among other states. Certainly not a distinction that we want. Chief Nevis touched on it a little bit. You know, we all, Narcan, naloxone is something that all our officers carry along with them. You know, 5 years ago, we didn't even know what Narcan, naloxone was. Now it's pretty much common terminology. I found it very interesting that Narcan is now in 25% of all the pharmacies in Michigan. That's over 700 pharmacies where you can actually get a prescription for naloxone. And obviously family members are with, loved ones who are struggling with addiction are finding that to be incredibly resourceful, being able to administer that drug before the fire department or the police department gets there. So a few months ago, I attended a training that was focusing on, a lot of the discussion focused on overdoses, particularly with the mixture of fentanyl and carfentanil. We've mentioned that before. Hands in the room, everybody, those without law enforcement. Those terms sound familiar? Okay. Well, for those of you who aren't really familiar with fentanyl or carfentanil, this is pretty much the stuff veterinarians use to knock out elephants. It's that strong of a drug. Actually, touching it can be fatal. But yet people are knowingly and willingly injecting this stuff into their bodies. And I found it interesting that while the risk of death is severe and almost certain, users are desperate to get a hold of it because, in their words, the extreme high they get from taking it outweighs the risk of death. So essentially, this isn't heroin that they're saying was laced. This is heroin that they wanted this mixture in there. And if you find the dope dealer that's got just the right mixture to put you almost this far, but not to cause death, then you are the dealer of the century. Everybody's coming to you, and you've just, running a killer business, literally. So pretty tragic stuff. This is what we're dealing with, folks, day in and day out. The problem's getting worse. We're seeing this again and again throughout the city, responding to, people passed out, whether it be from abuse of alcohol or opioids, pain pills. Chief Nevis mentioned the doctor from Farmington that was sentenced. I mean, clearly, abuse isn't just from the users, but it's from the providers as well. We're in a public health crisis. A lot of finger pointing going on as far as the doctors prescribing too much, but I think we're past that game. Now it's time to move forward and continue our initiatives to see if we can get a handle on this thing. So again, just a few numbers and statistics to share with you today. Again, I'm proud to work with the Call to Action Coalition, Children, Youth, and Families Safe, and all the committees that are so unique to our community, doing such a great job to try and get a handle on this. So I appreciate your time, and have a wonderful morning and weekend.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Frank. Our main speaker today is Deborah J. Deborah is a lecturer, author, and an interventionist. She has been on the Oprah Winfrey Show many times. Most recently, she was on the Dr. Oz Show. She is the author of It Takes a Family, The Structure of Family Recovery, No More Letting Go, The Spiritual of Taking Action Against Alcoholism and Drug Abuse. And she is a co-author of Love First and Aging and Addiction. Deborah has worked for the Hazelton Foundation as an inpatient addiction therapist for both men and women unit. She has facilitated the family program, coordinated the older adult program, worked in the intensive care, aftercare, and outpatient program. She designed an outpatient family program. She has also supervised the women's unit. She has worked as a clinical interventionist since 1996. She is a guest lecturer at Wayne State University for graduate level studies on substance abuse. She is a trustee of the Care Continuing Board of St. John's Providence Health System. As a member of the clinical care team, she was honored at the 54th Annual Detroit Bishops Dinner and received a Sister Lolita Close Award, which recognized her efforts in helping women affected by the disease of addiction. Deborah sits on the board of St. John's Providence Health System, Dawn Farms, and previously Brighton Hospital. Deborah is a nationally recognized public speaker, writes a newspaper column on alcohol and drug abuse. She is a graduate of Ohio State University. How did this happen? She is also a graduate of Hazelton School of Addiction Therapy. Please welcome Deborah J.
He woke you all up with that OSU thing, didn't he? It is so nice to be here today, and I love the call to action, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about this problem, it is all about action. And I'm going to ask you to do something while I'm speaking this morning. Most of you are here in a capacity of your professional life. If you could kind of move that hat over and look and listen from the point of view of the family, okay? So we're going to get started. I could keep you here for 4 hours, but I only have 45 minutes, but I hope you'll find this interesting and helpful. First thing I want to talk about is we have a problem. We know we have a problem. We've had some marvelous speakers with, just great information. But I would like to add another thing, and that is that 50 to 90% of people who go to treatment relapse in the first year. And this is very important for us to understand. Families do not understand this. A very good study that really took in consideration length of stay, quality of program, said we probably can say the number is 70%. Now, trust me when I say when that family writes a check for $20, $30, $35,000, $40,000, this is not what they're looking for, right? And one of the big things that we have to talk about right away is understanding treatment, what it does and what it doesn't do. But before we do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're up against. We talk about this disease all the time, but there's a little story. It's my favorite story, because there's this fellow, and he has lost everything to his alcoholism. He's lost his wife, his home, his career, all his money, and finally his self-respect. He has a half-empty bottle of whiskey. He has enough money to check himself into a flop house, and he sits down on the little cot and he looks at that bottle and he says, "You, I thought you were my friend, but no, you're not my friend. We're through." And he gets up and he goes to the window and he gets that window open and he cocks his arm back to throw that bottle out the window, and he hears swoosh. And he looks at the bottle and he says, "Was that an apology?" Okay? Was that an apology? Who are my football fans in this room? What do you keep your eye on? The ball. In this field, that moment is the ball. So when we talk about a call to action, that is the moment we need to keep our eye on. That is our ball. And because I work in the addiction field, let me tell you, everyone is all about outcome studies to show what a great job we're doing. I always tell people around the country, you're not going to like the statistics. 30% success rate, right? It's not going to be on the cover of your marketing materials. But that's the wrong thing to look at. What we need to look at is the ball. And it's that moment, swoosh, was that an apology? That's what takes all of us in the addiction field, all of you out here, that's what takes us to our knees with this disease. And most certainly, the families. So the first thing we need to do is start our conversation with treatment. And what I'd like to say is this. Let's look at diabetes. You're a diabetic. You're not taking care of your chronic illness. You end up in the hospital, in a diabetic coma. There are all sorts of good people there. They stabilize you. They educate you. PAs come in, docs come in, social workers. Here's a brochure. Read this, do this. And I'm like, "Doc, I got it. And I mean it. And I leave. And I'm going to do all those things." And then what happens 9 months later? I'm in bad shape again, right? And I'm back in the hospital. But do we say hospitals don't work? Do we? No, we don't. But when somebody relapses out of treatment, what do we say? Say that loud. Who said it? Treatment doesn't work. That's because we don't understand what treatment does and what it doesn't do. 2 words, acute and chronic. This is a chronic disease. There is no cure. But we can put it in a kind of remission by managing it with a program of recovery. That does not happen in the treatment center. The treatment center is this narrow strip of time, actually getting narrower and narrower. We have heroin addicts who are getting 8 to 12 days in the state of Michigan, and that is it. Okay, they could be 21 years old. Can you imagine what it's like for a family to see that heroin addict come out in 10 days after treatment? But that's, even if you get to have 120 days or 6 months, it's a narrow period of time. It is when you step outside of treatment that you need to start managing the chronic illness, you see, with a program of recovery. We need to understand this. Families need to understand this, because as long as we think treatment's going to fix people, we are already in trouble, because our expectations will literally dig our grave, okay? So, treatment and recovery have two different roles. They are not one and the same. Good treatment will do a stellar job of preparing people for recovery. But why outcome studies don't mean anything for treatment centers when you're looking after they leave is because there are a zillion variables out there that are going to play a role in the success or the failure of this addicted person. Okay? So, recovery prevents relapse, not treatment. Treatment may do a good job of trying to get people in recovery, but going to treatment will not alone prevent relapse. So, very quickly, SPECT images of the brain. The brain is changed. The physiology of the brain and the functioning of the brain. And I'm not going to talk about this much, but let's just look at the images. Think of families seeing this, okay? So here's a nice healthy brain. Here's a alcoholic binge drinker every weekend for 17 years. What are we seeing here? We're seeing atrophy of the brain, loss of activity in the brain, and this is not just when the person is under the influence, it's all the time, okay? Prefrontal cortex is extremely affected, the emotional brain, the limbic system, temporal lobes, decision-making, personality. You know, AA has this joke about active alcoholics. When do you know they're lying? When they're moving their lips, right? The inability to be honest, the inability to make good decisions, all of those kinds of things. So let's just look at this really quickly. Nice, healthy, active brain, 22 years of daily alcoholic drinking. We have cocaine. This is a 24-year-old. We have a 28-year-old methamphetamine addict. Great stuff on marijuana today. I want to say this is the brain of an 18-year-old smoking marijuana 3 years, about 4 times a week. Does anybody want this brain? Opiates. This is a 40-year-old, previously on heroin 10 years, methadone 7 years. Some circles, they talk about methadone as recovery. I would say methadone, this is not the brain of recovery, okay? This is not the brain I want. But look at this, before and after recovery, when we have abstinence 1 year. In AA, they say you'll get your brain back in 5 years, but science is saying, hey, look at after 1 year of recovery, what you're getting back. So, with that as a basis, I want to talk about the relapse issue, because if that's where I left you at 70% relapse, it would be a pretty depressing thing. But we know there's a winner's circle, and when you look at the photo, who do you see? In the center, we see a physician. We have an attorney. We have a pilot, okay? And I call them the winner's circle. So they're getting something the general public isn't getting, and they are getting a team who works with them for 3 to 5 years, depending the state they live in, okay? And because we don't let our neurosurgeons, we don't let our pilots out of treatment and say, oh, treatment is enough, you are fixed. No, we don't, okay? Because we know that they are highly likely to relapse and that they need a program of recovery and they need the support to make it happen. So let's look at one fabulous study. And lasting sobriety is the expectation for these people. This is a great study, a great friendly read. Dr. DuPont, he was President Ford's drug czar. He was the founding director of NIDA. Setting the standards for recovery physicians' health programs. I highly recommend you look at it and read it. It's great. Very quickly here, 904 addicted doctors that they looked at for over 5 years in 16 different physician health programs, or PHPs. So that's 16 different states, over 5 years, 904 addicted doctors. what they had, 50% alcoholic, 35%, imagine that, addicted to opioids, and 14% of those IV users. 15% other drugs, 31% alcohol and drugs, and 17% were up for legals. They were in trouble with the law. That's amazing. That is almost 1 out of 5 getting into treatment. These are physicians. Now, what's really amazing is when we look at the statistics of doctors in these PHP programs, 16 of them, and what did they find? 78% in 5 years had 0 relapse. Would we love that? What would our communities look like if we could say that? Very, very different. Then we have 15% in 5 years had 1 relapse. So now we're at 93%, 0 relapse or 1 relapse in 5 years. 7% had more than 1 relapse. This is astonishing, okay? What the researchers said, which we know, is length of time helps prevent relapse. This is true, but what they're saying next is more important. It allows the relapsers to succeed. We have a system for everybody else that does not allow the relapsers to succeed, and that's what we, as a society, are dealing with and spinning our wheels on and spending our money on and filling our prisons with, losing the best and the brightest, because a lot of these kids are the best and the brightest. My husband just celebrated the day before yesterday 36 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. Graduated, was a National Merit Scholar out of Grosse Pointe South, and ended homeless. He was homeless in California. And it was through working a program recovery that made him an upstanding, tax-paying citizen. Okay? So how do we do something to help the relapsers succeed? Okay? So I would call this the holy grail of recovery. And oftentimes people will say, well, of course they don't relapse. They're doctors. Let me tell you right now, I'm working inpatient treatment. As soon as I found out I had a physician coming in on my caseload, was in detox, audible groan. Anybody would, because we knew our work just doubled or tripled, very, very tough, and they're at higher risk for relapse. People will say, well, they have a medical license. I will tell you right now, everybody has something to lose, and at the top of that list is family, okay? And if we had more time, I'd tell you some more things. 30 years of research trying to get doctors and of programs to wash their hands between patients. Doctors are wonderful. It's not that they mean not to do it, but the fix was soap and water, and they haven't had success. So what we ask addicts to do alone is stay green. You know, we don't realize how difficult it is. The number one myth, and I always bring this up, is you can't help an alcoholic or addict until he or she wants help, and that seems to make sense. But it is the number one myth, and it's the most damaging myth. It says to families, you have to step back and let addiction run through your family like a freight train, okay? Because when the addict hits bottom, what we never say to the family is you are going along for the ride, including the smallest of children. What happens when I change this photograph and it's a physician in surgery? Does that myth still hold? Or if it was a pilot with 350 passengers flying from New York to LA, would that myth still be okay? I don't think so. Because you know what? We don't risk the doctor's patients. We don't risk the lawyer's clients. And we certainly do not risk the passengers in a jet airliner. But what about the families? We talk about the alcoholics and addicts all the time, but the thing is that we risk the families again and again and again. And especially around this country, a very dangerous new language is relapse is part of recovery. I want to say today, no, it is not. It is part of the disease, and relapse is always going to happen because something is missing in a recovery program. Okay? So, in saying all this, what I want to talk about, and because I've had the good fortune in my life to have a lot of great experience in this field, and I am the family member of an alcoholic father, a family member of a drug-addicted brother, and the family and the wife of a recovering alcoholic. Today, everybody in my family is sober, thank goodness, but I have the perspective as being the family member and growing up with this from the time I was the smallest child. And so I started thinking about what are we going to do, because we cannot continue to just professionalize this. We can't do it, and my field has kicked the family to the curb. We have trained the family, stay out of the way. And really, the reason was there was no insurance money to cover treating them. I will guarantee you, if we had the insurance money, we would have been treating the family like crazy. And the family will tell you all the time, there's nothing I can do. It's absolutely not true. It's probably the most powerful force, and until we start using the family, until we start leveraging the family, this problem is not going to go away. I want to talk about structured family recovery a little bit and give you a short sketch, because what it does is it puts families smack dab in the middle of recovery, no longer on the sidelines, but does it in the most appropriate and effective way. And we're going to look at this a little bit. Because first we build a recovery team. We have intervention. You know, when I got in this field, that was not a household word. You know, we wrote the book Love First, Jeff and I, and it became the Bible of intervention in this country and internationally, because it spoke to the family in the way that they could read it, and they always say, it feels like you're right in my living room with me, and walks them through it. And I always talked about before, that's intervention, during, that's treatment, and after, and we had nothing. Because the thing about it is that families, when you give them something meaningful, first of all, they know it's meaningful, and then they rise to the occasion. Intervention properly done is amazing what families do, and then they have nothing and they fall off the cliff again, and in treatment we will say, oh, the family is sicker than the alcoholic. But what it is they're in crisis and we're not giving them what they need. Is this working? I'm going to just talk to you like this. It seems to be going on and off, isn't it? Okay, so I'm just going to talk to you like this. So, can I come down closer to you? Sure. No, stay here. Oh, sorry, they have cameras. Okay, so, oh yeah, they won't hear me. So first we build a recovery team, and why I'm talking about intervention's always about a team. But you might have a cousin the alcoholic was close to but hasn't seen in 5 years. You might have someone from the workplace. With structured family recovery, these are the intimate people in your nuclear family and the closest people in your extended family. And the rule of thumb I have for these teams is these are the people that you will sit around the kitchen table with for breakfast in your pajamas, perfectly comfortable. Maybe you haven't even combed your hair yet or brushed your teeth. You're still okay with it. These are the people on this team, okay? And it's 2 simple steps, because simple is key. Every time we notch it up, even the littlest bit, to make something complicated, you're going to lose people. It has to be amazingly simple. So 2 simple steps for family members. Weekly SFR meeting, we'll talk about that in a second, and a 12-step meeting. Let me tell you, families engage in this when their motivation wave is high. The person's just going into treatment. They're talking about intervention. They're terrified they're going to die. And when we get people at a high motivation, they are in a place of willingness to say yes, okay? When we wait until their motivation is low, then we're trying to work so hard to get them up, so it's key. This is based on 12 steps. This is a framework for the family working together, but they all have their own 12-step program, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon for families, ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, whatever it might be. But then they come together every week as a family. They bring their problems to the 12-step meetings, not to their family. They bring their positive brain, their forward-looking brain to the family, okay? So let me talk about the SFR meeting. We keep it incredibly simple. This is not therapy, so it happens on conference calls on your phone. Everybody's got a phone. Why is that important? Because you will never get a family, even if they live geographically close to each other in the same office week after week. It will not happen. But people can get on the phone. You can be on vacation. You can be in bed in your pajamas. You can be at your child's soccer game. You don't have to worry about rush hour. You don't have to put on makeup or get dressed or anything else. It's simple. You just dial in. 1 hour every week, start on time, end in time. I know what to expect. It's simple. Simple format in the book, which looks really fat and like, oh my God, you really don't want me to read this whole thing, but actually much of it is a whole year of meetings for the family. A whole year of meetings. They know week in and week out, and the meetings themselves guide them, and we'll look at that in a minute. So very simple format. And very early on, the team members learned something amazing. I'm just going to focus on myself because the family spent all this time. If you're my alcoholic, right, and I don't have any kind of personal recovery myself, I'm just looking at you all the time, right? Because I don't know what you're going to do next, and I don't even see myself anymore. So family starts structured family recovery first, then the addict is joined in. Why would that be? We want a positive social norm. Everyone's gone to meetings, 12-step meetings. The family can articulate positive things about it. So when the alcoholic or addict joins, we have a positive social norm. It's a big mistake if the family is like, I don't know why you need to go to these meetings. I don't want to go to these meetings. Why do we need recovery? Because the addict's going to follow through with them. So we want the family to move forward. We usually bring them in, the addict or alcoholic, on the 4th week, which the topic is forgiveness, and it's extremely powerful, okay? So, but this is when something magical starts to happen, okay? Can you come up here just for a minute? Do you mind? It's Ellie? Yeah. Ellie, we met already. So Ellie's going to be my sister, okay? So Ellie, do you mind being my sister who's an alcoholic?
No.
You don't mind that, okay. So the thing is, I am, can I say this? Okay, I'm just going to say it. Plug your ears, girls. You've all heard it. I'm bitchy sister, okay? I am the sister who is on her case all the time. You know, I can't believe what you're doing to mom and dad. You know the routine. I find out she's coming to Thanksgiving. I'm on the phone. I'm not coming. If she's coming, I'm not coming, right? But Ellie finally gets into treatment, okay? And I've been treating her pretty badly. And I've done nothing for myself. And when she gets out, have I changed? Oh, no, I haven't. That's right. Because you know what I'm saying now? I don't believe her. She says she's going to meetings. Forget it. She lies all the time. And how are you feeling when you just hear me saying this?
Not good.
Not good, are you? So you might think, why do I bother? Right? It's hurtful and horrible, right? Because I don't know she has a disease. I think she's just being terrible to us. But now I've been in structured family recovery. I'm working my own program of recovery. I've got I'm ready to get a sponsor. And she's out, she's in AA, she's ready to get a sponsor. And we're talking, I'm like, there's this woman in Al-Anon, she's got what I want, but every time I go to ask her, I'm afraid, and I turn around and walk out, and she goes, same thing with me in AA. But everyone else on our team has a sponsor, so she and I make this agreement, and we pinky shake on it. This week, we're getting our sponsors, right? Right? Before the next meeting. Well, now we're not like this anymore, you see. We're like this. We're like this. Am I not going to do it? Am I going to let her show me up? No, because we are working together, but we have healthy competition. We have empathy, and not only that, I get how hard it is. They told her coming out of treatment she had to start out 90 meetings in 90 days, and I'm only asked to go to 1 meeting a week. I'm like, geez, now I understand how tough this is, you see? And we have a whole different relationship in our family. Does it feel better?
Yes.
The pinky shade?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ellie. Thank you. Thank you. So you get this feeling, right? How it changes the family. And the amazing thing, it changes a family, most families, not every family, of course, most families very quickly. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and everything starts turning around. So I'm going to give you a case study of a family. This is a family, the upper middle class family, husband and wife, parents and grandparents. She became addicted to, we think it's a recent problem, but it isn't. She'd been addicted to opiate pain medications for 30 years. She'd had 3 treatments, and she always relapsed. The longest sobriety she had was 3 months. And they were extremely active in their church. The husband was a deacon, very involved, very strong, close-held faith. But in their church, the 12-step programs were not considered okay because sometimes they use the word higher power, and they just weren't really happy about it, so they never got involved in recovery program. They started closing the pill mills down. This was in Florida, and what do you think happened next? Anybody have an idea where she went to get her drug? The streets. And what did she end up buying, which was cheap? Heroin. So now we have a 59-year-old upper middle class mother shooting heroin. And that took the family to their knees. And she went to treatment for 10 months, and the family did structured family recovery. And while she was in treatment, they got her on the calls. And that was almost 3 years ago, and that woman they did it for 2 years as a family together, and then continued their recovery program, and she's still sober today, and still working a program of recovery today. This is what it looks like. This is week 31, so that if any of you know the 12 steps, they're going to be in their 12-step program working on step 8, but this is what structured family recovery looks like. There's an opening. These are the group expectations, so everyone understands, you know, the group expectations. There's a daily reading, and the week before, they know the topic is progress. They have daily meditation books that are for families in recovery, and somebody is assigned the topic progress. They read it. Everybody shares what they think. This is all forward-moving, positive thinking, because if I just opened this up to a family, what would you like to talk about? Are they going to talk about anything positive? Oh, no, they're not. We're going down the path into the past, rehashing. You and I, my sister and I, are going to be at each other's throats. She's going to run out. I'm never doing this again. This creates a behavior expectation of moving forward into recovery and the positive brain. I'm working with a family. They're actually a sex addiction family, and the adult son actually went in the legal system, and he's on probation. He thought he was going to go to prison. He's now a sex offender, different state, not Michigan. And his dad, they had their week on forgiveness. The dad said, I spent 2 hours finding just the right reading for my family. The families take this very, very seriously. So then after that, we have report, discuss, and plan. Every family member goes around. What went well in my recovery this past week? What insights did I gain from my 12-step experience? What new recovery behaviors will I practice in this upcoming week? Every single family, imagine being that addicted person, hearing your dad, your mom, your siblings, your grandfather, everybody doing this. It's so powerful. One young woman, she was at the Betty Ford Center, and when she joined the 4th week of her treatment and her dad spoke, she just started bawling her eyes out. And the Structured Family Recovery, this is on a call now, remember, said, what's wrong? What's going on? She said, I've never heard my father speak that way in my entire life. Okay? The power of the family. After that, there are 3 paragraphs. Learn something new. We're going to read them. Why? Because I want this process, this framework, to take the families in that positive direction. I want the ideas to come into their head, then I want them to be able to share it. So learn something new could be directly related to recovery or something indirectly supportive of it. So this starts out, in the words of Ernest Hemingway, there is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. By now, in working our 12-step program and meeting weekly with our Structured Family Recovery team, we most assuredly are superior to our former selves. So it goes on. Everyone shares about that. I am so frequently almost brought to tears by what comes out of people's mouths when we give them something that they know is meaningful spiritually, positive, and that they know that it's forward moving for their family. It's unbelievable the things that they say. I madly write this stuff down because I'm like, wow, Step 8, we're on step 8. Okay, made a list of all persons we'd harmed and became willing. We just have to be willing at this point to make amends to them all. Okay? And then it's about this step, And at the end it says, by becoming willing to make amends to all whom we've harmed, acknowledging our wrongs, we clear away the debris that prevents us from seeing what's right in our life. They understand the value of this, and they're working these programs together. And then what working a program means, a recovery program means, because a lot of people think it means going to a meeting. No, that's just part of it. Oh, well, she went to meetings, and she relapsed. AA doesn't work. Then I want to ask, Well, tell me what else she did. Did she have a sponsor? No. Was she working the steps? Well, she said she was reading about them on her own, which you don't do in isolation. Did she have a service position? Oh, she wasn't working a program of recovery. Or maybe she did sometimes and then not other times, okay? So, and then they get a sponsor because we're always sending them back to their 12-step program. The 12-step program is where I'm going to improve myself. Structured family recovery is a different question. I'm going to ask myself, who am I in relation to my family? I'm going to bring my improved self to structured family recovery, working with my family. And as family members work together, it gets to be really difficult to relapse. It gets really difficult not to work a program recovery. And when relapse happens, there's a plan, and they're back in recovery, in most cases, really quick, like really quick. Okay? And then we have a closing statements for anybody who knows anything about AA. It's the promises of AA, and we read those Red Robin, and they're so powerful, and it tells that family every single week what they're working for. So that's how it works. They see what I mean? Structured family recovery counselors work with them. It's not therapy, but they're facilitators and guides, and they're trained to do this, which is really important. So I'd like to end a little bit because family members do this out of fear of relapse. That's why they decide to do it. But in the end, and actually very quickly, they realize, oh my gosh, this is about bringing our family back together, and this is about relationships. So in the book, I have something that's titled, We Practice the Spirituality of Kindness, and I'd like to read this to you. True kindness doesn't sit in judgment asking, do you deserve me? Kindness is an identity we choose for ourselves. When we are kind, we have chosen not to be critical. When we are kind, we have chosen not to be angry. When we are kind, we are saying, you are valuable to me. Small kindnesses are so powerful that when we choose them, we can change a family. Some families are filled with so much hurt they can no longer find kindness in their hearts. But AA has a saying, act as if, act kind and you will become kind. Aristotle said it too. Acting virtuous will make one virtuous. And I'm going to go on just one more second on this reading because it's important. During active addiction, much is not beautiful and many things hurt us, and we, in all likelihood, hurt others. Kindness is hard won after so much injustice and pain. It's born of an experience that offered us little hope. Yet once we're delivered into recovery, we are given the opportunity to repair and strengthen the fabric of our families. And this last sentence is key. It takes working together, and that cannot happen without kindness. It takes working together, and that cannot happen in a lasting way without kindness. So I'd like to close and say, in reestablishing kindness, that we have to all understand, whatever our role is when we're looking at addiction, is that the alcoholic, the addict, the family, they all want the same thing. We may be talking to them with all sorts of therapeutic jargon. We may be talking to them the language of recovery and sobriety, etc. We may be talking to them in the language of the laws of our land. But at the end of the day, they are listening to us for only one reason, and that reason is because they are looking for happiness. They hope that what we bring them and what they take from us will reinstore happiness into their life. And let's take a moment and just look at what that looks like in a family. Elizabeth Barrett Browning said, "The earth is crammed with heaven." Every family that comes to us, all they're asking for is their little piece of heaven. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah, for that inspiring presentation. I'd like to invite up Judge Brady and Judge Parker to lead us in the coalition pledge.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's always an honor to be asked to do the pledge because as we hear such inspiring messages, we know that this is just the start, that we all in our lives, our personal lives, our professional lives, this is just the first step of going forward and trying to make a difference for people, and I think this pledge is a reminder.
Ditto.
All right. If you'll all raise your right hands, you have a copy of the pledge if you'll read along with us. I, as a member of the Farmington Hills community, do solemnly swear to do my part and commit to break the silence surrounding the pain and chaos caused by the underage or illegal alcohol or other drug use, abuse or addiction, and domestic violence. I acknowledge that my commitment will support community members in need of intervention and support, which will ultimately save lives. Further, I acknowledge that today, that my commitment today, on October 6, 2017, will assist to maintain safety and security for the well-being of all who reside in the Farmington Hills community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, judges. I was 40 years old when alcohol and drug abuse came into my family. I had 40 years of life experience to try to deal with it. I had a job, I had a car, I had some money in my pocket. I had options. I'm involved with the Alateen program in Oakland County, and I run the meeting on Thursday nights in Farmington Hills. Most of the kids coming in this program are born into this disease. They never had a normal childhood. They don't have a job, don't have a car, they don't have any money in their pocket. They have very few options. And one of the options they do have is coming to the 12-step program of Alateen and letting them hear their voice. They don't have a voice at home when this disease is in their house. I had a girl show up 2 years ago, and right from the start, she's telling me she has to get up at 5 in the morning. She has to get her 2 younger sisters fed and dressed. They have to go to daycare before they go to school. Both mom and dad leave for work early. A little later in the meeting, she's telling me she normally doesn't go to bed till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Why are you staying up so late? And she tells me, I have to stop my mom and dad from fighting from this disease of alcoholism. She was 11 years old. She's taken on the role of the mom because of the disease. Her third meeting, she called me after that and told me, I slept 14 hours last night. And this is a completely different girl in a very short period of time. She's focused in school again, she's focused in sports, she's focused in band. And it's a pleasure to see not only her and her younger sister, but both mom and dad working a program, and they have a very happy family right now. And it's the rewards of working a 12-step program. So if you have children, and I believe the children of an alcoholic, an addict, are the people harmed the most by this disease and have the hardest trouble getting help. So if you have a child or a grandchild that can use a 12-step program because of alcohol or drug abuse, do everything you can to get them into the Alateen program. There's a stigmatism with a mental illness. If I tell this room that I have cancer, everybody here is willing to tell me about their doctor. If I tell you I have a mental illness, it's crickets in the room. When I first started asking for help, one of my closest friends told me I don't know anything about it. And I'm stepping back because I know 2 months earlier I went to her sister's funeral who died of alcoholism. She couldn't talk about it. Since then, she has told me her dad died from it. Her older brother got a liver transplant. She has a brother right now on the waiting list for a liver transplant. It's through the whole family, but she couldn't talk about it. We need to break the silence on this disease. One last person I want to thank is Becky Dorkin. Becky is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Call Action Coalition, and she is the lady who does all the legwork for this organization. So Becky, thank you for everything you did. And I want to thank the schools, the courts, the police and fire department, and Haven here for everything you've done to help this program grow, and the schools. So with that, thank you for coming. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Thank you, Deborah, for a lovely presentation. It was inspiring, and everyone have a nice afternoon.